Welcome to the War on Comics, the podcast where we break down comics, overanalyze them, and occasionally make good points. I'm Omar, and with me as always is Colin. Today, we ask, are comics actually the perfect medium? And if so, should we be afraid? Very afraid.
Chin Hot Private. This is the War on Comics. I'm Colin. Across from me, I got Omar.
Hey.
Today, we're asking the burning question: what can comics do that other mediums cannot? We got some books to exchange. We're going to get into, but before that, why don't we recap what we talked about last week?
So last week we got into why read comics in the first place, and that's when we started our comics exchange, and I was completely floored by the comics that I read. It was an Evan Dorkin comic, and it was everything that you would want out of an Evan Dorkin comic that I had never gleaned before. It was beautiful. And I think Colin had some thoughts about the the stuff I gave him last time.
Some quarter bin thrashers.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Straight quarter bin heavy boys. But so this week, like you said, we had what can comics do that other mediums can't? And I think it was interesting, and I love doing the question forward kind of reading because it kind of puts me in an extra active state while reading it. I had to read it a few times actually this pick. So what did you give me this week?
I gave you a Marvel graphic novel. Now, are you familiar with the Marvel graphic novel as a format?
No, I mean I've heard of like the first one that's on here, which is the Death of Captain Marvel, the
Right.
Jim Starlin stuff. I've heard
Yes.
that his stuff is like next fucking level.
It's I mean, Starlin stuff is like, I guess it's kind of like code for like cosmic Marvel in general, which is all kind of next level. But these were kind of prestige format, straight to comics retailers stories. They were kind of self-contained and had really high quality paper. It was sort of like elevated comics presentation that popped up in, I think the first one was like in the early 80s, like 81-ish or so. There's maybe about 30 of these, and they're honestly all kind of awesome. I really love them. They're cheap dates too. Like, you won't find them in dollar bins, but I don't think they like resale for much, and you can usually find them in lots on eBay. This one is obviously like the underline 3-time exclamation point standout is that Bernie Wrightson does the art. And the lady, Susan K. Putney, this is, to my understanding, the only comic she wrote. I think she had a novel, like a sci-fi novel she did in the 70s. And I think like a quick Wikipedia read I read of her said that she ran a comic shop as well in the 70s.
Fuck yeah.
So it's cool to see a like monthly comics writer and Bernie fucking Wrightson of all
Yeah.
people doing a Marvel comic.
It was incredible, dude. This one was I mean, you continue with giving me the hits, and I dug deep on what I wanted to share with you this week as well. So
Yeah, why don't you tell me about this, because you know this fella, right?
yeah, dude, this is my buddy Christian Costello. He's a dude from Daly City. This is his first book, I believe. It's called Wild or So I Was Born to Be. I think the story is it features like some stories that he heard when he was a kid, and it follows in I think it's like a perfect combo of like the Los Bros if they both morphed
Right.
and fucking made modern comics.
What do you call it? YA? Is that insult?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
No, I don't think that's insulting.
Okay, yeah. Very YA, coming of age. It's like, man, sports comics and
Yeah.
sports manga are really interesting to me because I'm, a textbook dork who doesn't have any interest in, athleticism in general. But when you put it in a bunch of panels and go page to page, I'm like, oh, I'm invested in this now.
That's why we're library punks, baby.
Yes. So I really I dug this quite a bit. I thought it was I guess the first thing you notice is this crazy color scheme. It's like these orangish hues, this 4-color kind of coloring style that gets stuck through as the comic goes along. Complements the art style well, maybe grounds it even a little, because I think what the artwork excels at is this kind of, if one of the characters, let's say, sees a bully as someone scary, the bully will be, 12 feet tall and look super demonic, and, because you're viewing it through the character's eye, and it doesn't necessarily hold your hands and say, well, this is a dream or this is a vision. It's just like, as you're reading it, you're like, all right, let's rock. This is a, demon person or whatever. And I think because the art can veer into the surreal or super exaggerated, having that like colors grounded in that like 4 or 5 shades, it's definitely is a nice balance and contrast as a sort of freewheeling story that's being told. And the art is really, I mean, that's the high point to me, but man, when they exaggerate and get dynamic, it's about roller derby, which is perfect for this kind of comic storytelling, 70s roller derby, where you have these kind of larger than life characters. And as they go around in these dramatic poses, the art is very complimentary to that. And it makes it a lot more interesting than it needs to be, I guess,
I think so. It, like you're saying, it's all a well thought out piece, and if it all came by accident, it's insane that they would have.
And I would even say this, like the second half of the story seems like he's honing his art style as he's going along, because the second half is even more exaggerated, and it's like he's seeing what worked in the first half and kind of like playing to the strengths. So to see that kind of development happen in real time as you're reading it is an added bonus, I guess.
Yeah, dude. It's a beautiful comic. I think we both had really great picks this week. So we're going to get into why we think comics stand up to, I think, all other media that isn't as appreciated.
Or maybe just what comics can do that others can't. What's exclusive. Maybe it's not holding up to so much as it is just like makes it unique.
It's its own thing. So let's see. So my first question to you on what you kind of gleamed off this one is, these are kind of just some points of what comics can do that other things can't. So first of all, movies and music kind of happen at you.
Right.
They are projections from a person or many people and then presented to you. In that same vein, though, comics are kind of at your own pace.
Right.
And at your own engagement. So I just for the feeling the burn on this week, when I was reading this, dude, you cannot just gleam over this.
Yeah. There's I mean, first of all, the artwork is like, well, it's insane, because when he's drawing like regular cityscapes or the figures, like the human characters, it's like pretty straightforward. Who's like a good, like a Neil Adams type,
Absolutely.
like not too divorced from anything abnormal. But then when he gets to doing monsters and he does creatures and he does the crazy floating ships, it's like, oh yeah, this is fucking Bernie Wright. And I think he uses like a different different tools to draw these monsters. I guess the basic plot, and I think this is so fascinating about that comic, is that I had to like go and look at the fandom or whatever, stuff online, because none of the characters appear in anything else. This is truly, it's a story about Spider-Man going into this pocket dimension and helping this girl. What's her name?
She's got a crazy ass.
Not the crazy version, but like the normal.
Mandy.
Okay.
So we got Mandy.
So he helps Mandy because she is a girl who is daughter of a wizard who cast a spell on her to not let her age.
Yes.
And there's this demon or monster that's like essentially evolving as the comic goes on to try to kill her. And I guess the punchline at the end is that, like, basically she's getting Spider-Man to help her kill this monster, but ultimately the monster was a device that her dad invented to sort of test her and challenge her.
Yep.
And it's very like Saturday morning cartoon moral of the story, where it's like, and so when you challenge yourself, you grow as a person.
I literally, in my notes, I had put that this is the kind of after school special that was meant for like 90s extreme Omar.
Right.
When I was growing up, this was like, dude, I wish this was a fucking Spider-Man episode.
Oh yeah.
You know, like this is something that, like, it feels like an EC comic.
For sure, because of, the monsters.
The monster, Bernie Wrightson kind of having his hand in, I think, shaping the world.
Right.
And was this on, like, I don't know too much about Marvel Method. Was this a Marvel Method thing, or was this like more respected since it was a graphic?
I could not tell you, like, because a lot of the ones that come out are like solo or like auteur driven, so it'll be like just, I think John Byrne's She-Hulk is like, that's a banger, by the way. But it'll be like the writer and artist will have at it. I'm gonna get crucified for this, but I think Frank Miller's Elektra is one of those.
Oh fuck yeah.
So if it's definitely not like churned out in the way that like a monthly is, but it's crazy in this when they go to that pocket dimension, like the backgrounds are just voids. Like there is they're not spending time on anything but these goddamn monsters.
It was economically, like, in some panels, I would say that, like, being familiar with Bernie Wrightson from his Frankenstein stuff, it definitely felt different. There was some panels that seemed a little more rushed in a way, or I wonder if they had him rework it down, because his figures are usually very, like, anatomically kind of like correct.
Yeah, these are like on model for as far out of an artist as Wrightson is. Like, it's not like when Sienkiewicz gets to run wild with like Wolverine or something. Like, this is as on model as Spider-Man. This is a John Romita Jr. style Spider-Man. Right down the line. But when he gets to do all the other shit in it, he just stretches. And I guess to speak to your like point of kind of making your own pacing, since it's so action driven and there's tons of splash pages and there's like really detailed work, like you can, it took me probably, I think that Spider-Man comic is probably a fourth the size of the Wild or So I Was Born to Be graphic novel, but like probably took me longer to read the Spider-Man because each page turn is like, you spend your time, your eyes are drawn to all these crazy detailed drawings, or why there aren't, backgrounds or space, or this weird void world that he's kind of created. And it sort of speaks to the pocket dimension element of the story, that those characters aren't used again any other time in Marvel history. It is truly an anomaly, but also not like, because it's like, I'm going to go to this little portal and then I'm going to come back. You're spending, this is maybe like an hour of Marvel Comics continuity time. This does not contradict anything that was happening in the monthly issues or anything like that.
Okay.
So, I think that definitely is the pacing. I think for me, reading your comic here, it's like, pacing is incredible, because when you get to there's like a lot of action scenes with the roller derby sequences and the sports, and you can just kind of, they're quick paced for a reason, because it matches the speed and the action of the comics. And it's like, you're, and I think visually the style is, smooth enough where you can just page turn. And the pacing is definitely something that is on you in comics, and definitely controlled by a writer and artist. If they know what they're doing, they can speed you up and slow you down as they see fit, but ultimately it is kind of on you how much you choose to pay attention.
They give you that as much information as you need per panel. I think that's like where the power comes from in comics as well, as like they can spend a lot of time
Yes.
on each page, on each sequence, I guess. And I think that's another point that we were going to bring up of why what comics can do that other media can't.
Yeah, because I saw that Brutalist movie like this week. It's Oscar time, depending on when you're watching this, listening to this episode. And like that's a 3.5 hour movie, and motherfucker, it's 3.5 hours. You're not speeding past anything. You're not slowing down. Like they tell you how long that goddamn movie is, and you are gonna sit your ass down and watch that movie. That's I guess what you. That's that is that passive viewing because you have to just sit down and take it. Whereas, yeah, with comics, you do kind of have some say in how quickly you want to read it.
You can digest it as it comes, as as you read it. And if honestly, I mean, this was a fucking banger, dude. This is like it, I'm gonna keep saying it, but the reverence I have for this kind of stuff is that it's it's not as celebrated as I feel like it should be.
Oh yeah, and the fact that like I mean I've had that sitting around the shop, and a couple friends came by, and then it's like, what the hell is this? It's like it's fucking Bernie Wright's and Spider Man. Like why like it's not necessarily. I don't know if it's collected anywhere, and it's not. Again, this isn't like it's there's certain works like The Dark Knight Returns or fill in the blank like celebrated comic that has legs and is passed down person to person, but there's just so much quality coming out of that time period of the 80s at least, where it's like things like this, even with as big of a name as Wrightson is and as big of a name as Spider-Man is,
Right.
it can still slip through the cracks. I guess that's not exclusive to comics, though. There's always movies that are
Yeah.
like,
Underappreciated stuff.
yes.
But I mean, it is like you're saying. It's a Spider-Man. This
Right.
is a Spider-Man issue, and I think maybe if you lived through this time, you definitely pick this up.
Right.
And was this around the time that he was designing the Thing?
Jeez, I'm not like a Wrightson historian. I'm not a
Dude,
maybe that sounded
what?
shittier than I meant. I'm not like I know like his imagery and his style and
Yeah.
everything, but like the beats for beats of his career, I'm not really entirely sure. But I feel like that whole Marvel graphic novel line is like really underappreciated.
Mm.
Again, like there's not that many of them. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
that hard to get them all, and I've never read one that I'm like, well, this fucking sucks. There's some
Oh,
that are better
nice.
than others.
So they had probably a more freedom. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, there's no comics code. They're not inherently bound to continuity, though sometimes
So
there's
rad.
issue. And yeah, I mean, again, it's sort of this sad reality where because it's not locked into the continuity of, well, you got to read this to know what the next one is. People don't, I don't know if they find their way into like omnibus, or if like
Okay.
omnibus readers are like trying to seek these kind of those Marvel graphic novels out.
'Cause
And
it's
people
not
who
canon.
right, or it is canon, but it's not like dependent on the story, isn't dependent on the next
This
issue
was
or
an
whatever.
adventure, an
Yes.
adventure for Spider-Man.
Right. And unfortunately, I just think the kind of people who like, will track down old superhero comics aren't necessarily like, they're following the comics. They're following the characters and not the artist.
Yeah.
So to say there's a Bernie Wrightson Spider-Man comic, it's like, what? Hold on, let's figure this out. Whereas,
Where the fuck did this come from?
Yeah.
Like,
whereas I think, more interest to Spider-Man fans is like, look, it's the first appearance of Red Carnage or fucking Red, whatever those Venoms are. Look, it's Shriek's first appearance.
a wonderful shriek.
Yeah, those are the people who kind of are more fanatical about the characters, and something like this, they just it's over their heads. And then people who like creators and stuff, they're like, yeah, it's Spider-Man, I don't care.
Right,
So
right.
you're in this no man's land of
Lives in a weird nook for it's an anomaly, and it's a wonderful anomaly that I feel like is we're lucky to have it. Honestly, it's pretty fucking fun. Um, so let's see. Another point I wanted to bring up about what comics can do is, like we were saying, there's like a juxtaposition that needs to happen in comics where you have a story that's like working on in speech bubbles or in text boxes, but there's also a visual story that happens in front of you that could be completely insulated from the words, or it complements each other. And I think a great comic does understands that, or it works in those boundaries very well. How did you feel about? Because I think Christian really went off in how he was having the characters drive the story.
Yeah, it's what I call like a shell game, meaning like your eyes are over the you got the three cups and the ball, and he's shuffling the ball
Yeah.
around. You're supposed to pick which cup the ball is under.
Yeah.
So while one hand's doing something over here, the other one's doing something over there. So on one hand with this comic, it's like look at the sports and the action and the fun, and then on the other hand, and it's true of the art too. It's like look at this crazy wild out there art, but then on the other hand where you're not if you're paying attention to the art, you're not noticing what is also happening is like the character development and the interpersonal relationships being told. And I think I guess it is not necessarily exclusive to comics to have that method. I mean, again, in film, you can have what is it? You're supposed to a good film you can watch with the sound off and still understand what's happening based on like the actors' faces and stuff. And then there's dialogue, which is supposed to enhance that. So you could argue that's happening there, the sight and the sound. But I think with comics, it's so much more present because there is, of course, a division between art and text, and maybe the eyes work differently with art and text. Whereas with movies, I think you generally take it as like a monolith. It's just a
Yeah.
block coming at you,
Yeah.
and cheesy dialogue will just botch something in a way, regardless of how well their I don't know faces are conveying. But whereas with comics, I think there's a little bit more leeway. And yeah, the best creators definitely know how to find the balance of text and visuals and sort of like it's like I said, you're trying to follow the ball and the ball is action action action, and then you're not noticing like you're reading some strong dialogue, you're reading background information, and just the way your mind processes it. I feel it's very it's like it's an interesting experience.
Yeah, like the subtext that happens in that kind of front on when there's great interplay between those things, like that's where you fill in the gaps, I think, with your imagination as well.
Yeah, you're talking about like the the action
Yeah.
between panels,
Yeah.
famously.
Yes, the that's definitely like a Scott McCloud championed kind of thing that I've heard before, of how you have to be engaged to it's an interplay between you and the comic as well. It's not just like forming in front of you.
Right.
It's like you have to be engaged and put in that work in your head. Um and I wonder how, what that brings up, this might be a little tangent, but like have you heard of aphasia?
Aphasia. Oh, I have definitely heard the word,
I
but I
wonder
couldn't. Is that like when you something to do with like when you can't talk or something like that?
it's like, yeah, I think it has something to do with
Or that's Broca's aphasia.
Broca's aphasia.
Yes, that's
Is
when
it?
you. I
I'm
think that's
thinking of the
something like
one
when
where
you
you
can't talk.
can't imagine things. They can't
Oh,
form like
I heard about this.
pictures
These
about that.
little sickos out here running around. They can't like. There's people who don't have the inner dialogue, which is
Yeah.
bizarre, and then there's people that can't like envision something.
That trips me out.
Right. And that's, I guess, just different ways people experience life. And what's fucked up is you'll be walking around, knee deep in the grass with these snakes, and all of a sudden they're like, "Yeah, I can't fucking imagine shit." What the fuck are you talking about?
You're just dropping that bomb on me right
Yeah,
now.
like we've known each other for years.
And what is that experience like? If you do have this and you read comics, please like tell me how how do you experience these things? How is that experience for you? I I don't want to talk down and like sound like we're talking down, and I really genuinely want to know.
Well, yeah,
what
I
is
mean,
that like?
if a fundamental part of the experience, if Mr. McCloud is to be believed, is to kind of, as each panel goes on, you're sort of inventing the actions between them. If you don't have this ability to, I don't know, put that imagination together, or I guess just fill in the blanks
Yeah.
of what they're not showing. I don't
Just
know
work
what
like
that
a
looks like.
slideshow then?
I don't know.
Get at us. Get at us in the chat if we do get a chat going. So let's see. There's another kind of I think something that comics can do that other stuff can't do it in the same way. And I think this one for me is huge, is intimacy. I think that I get pretty not in a hey creeps. Not like that. Uh I feel like there's an inherent intimacy with comics because you can look at them close up, like
Right.
microscopically. And I'm sure you can do that with other mediums like photography and film if you're watching it on your phone or something. But as far as the interaction of like how it shines off the page, and there's these like details that I think in this analog format, it's like it's to me it's the word is righteous. I think that it's fucking like the small like lines that it just looks like a brush stroke from Bernie, or it looks like a brush stroke from Christian. It's I can almost feel the energy that they put in, and I think it's not felt in the same way as like, let's say we keep bringing up film, but maybe like video games,
Right.
which is another kind of form of media and entertainment. Um, I think that's what makes it a little more special, is that you can almost meditate on it.
Right. I think that kind of plays with that notion of pacing, where you kind of make it your own. If we're talking
Yeah.
about intimacy, that's about as intimate as it gets, is
Yeah.
when you have control over the way that you bring in the media to your eye holes. I
Feast upon it.
And I think that intimacy is kind of two ways. And on an economic level, like, I understand how to make a comic. I can break out a piece of paper and, draw 4 panels or whatever. Whereas, like, if you want me to make, a movie, it's like, I mean, I can make a video on my fucking phone, obviously, but you know what I'm talking about. If I want to make, a Dune Part 3 on my own, I don't think I can pull that off. Whereas, I probably could in comics form, and it would just be, I don't know, Paul Atreides jerking off or something like
There
that.
you go. That's the Dune I want to see.
Yeah, it would just make his dork turn into a worm, and the worm would take over. Yeah, it does fucking happen in the books. You ever read those fucking things? The Dune books?
I've tried.
Yeah. It's
The God Emperor Dune. I think I started with that
you
one.
why would you start there?
Because somebody told me that that's the most approachable one.
I love that book, but that is like, no.
I was so lost,
Bro,
dude.
you
know
are-
who you are, and you steered me wrong.
I like those books, but they are like, okay, listen, here's the Dune take, all right? I think
Yes.
you have to be like, okay, it's from an autistic person's point of view. I don't care what anyone says. So the Bene Gesserit witch, which is like their version of like the Jedi, right? They're like magic users in that world, right?
Yes.
Their magic ability is being able to understand what people are feeling without them even expressing it. They can just look at their face and understand the thoughts and feelings in their mind, because they are these magical order that has been going on for generations. It's like, man, I think you're just bad at reading a room. Like, if you think that's magic, that is what most people could just walk around doing. Like, how did this Bene Gesserit witch understand that I was upset because they didn't do the dishes? Yeah, just, you can't read a room, and so you make that magic in your world, and it's amusing. But I don't know. I think that I do really like those. I read like, I think the first 4, of which God Emperor is the 4th. That fool turns into a fucking worm.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Anyways, I just do that with his penis. Anyways, what was I getting at? Oh yeah, but I can't make that fucking movie because it involves all this stuff, the
But-
effects and shit like that. Whereas I think comics, the economy of them permits someone to tell a more intimate story or just a story that maybe shouldn't be told, just some shit that's like on their mind that they can
It does go
jot
both
down.
ways. It goes both ways. There's great comics and shit comics.
Oh, of course.
And like I think it's important to make that distinction as well. But along those lines, there is no CGI budget.
Right.
So you
is
can make a fucking epic.
absolutely.
Which this is definitely in that.
Yeah, I think there's no shortage of. I mean, we were talking about Bone last time. I mean, that is pen and paper, bro. Like, and they go so far out, and it is borderline unadaptable. I think. I mean, I'm definitely not interested in a Bone.
I wouldn't want to watch that.
Yeah, I'll give you like cartoon, ideally, like a 1-to-1 animated, series, but. That's not sexy, I think, to people who make things. And they've tried to, case in point, like they've tried to adapt that for generations now. And it's so, I just don't think the money is there to do it right. And I don't think the interest is there to do it hacky.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
That's a great example of like, why the intimacy of the medium in terms of like, one person can put what's in their brain in your hands, whereas multi-billion-dollar corporations who have, licensed this stuff and have option rights on it, they can't. But one fucking guy armed with, some brushes and some gumption can, change the face of a medium. And that's, I think, again, that's the two-way intimacy. That's intimacy from creator to reader. And then you're talking about kind of a more tactile, personal intimacy. So yeah, I think intimacy all around is there in comics in a way that isn't there with other mediums.
Definitely. It's the stories that I think this is another, I'm just thinking of this now, of another power that comics carry is that kind of like imagination between
Right.
That's insular to every person that reads it. So those in between moments and those imagined moments are locked into each person, and they might all be different. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a valid point. And I think, there are people who I've talked to who are just like, I don't know which direction to read them in, like.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Things where you're like, this is simple. You just follow the things. But, maybe there are people who just aren't used to the medium, or maybe they're just being difficult. Maybe they just don't want to fucking read this shit. And they're just coming up with a reason.
I think that's such a fucking low. That's them not engaging.
Right.
You're not engaging. It's so, dude, they made a fucking formula of how to write a comic at like the Marvel kind of comics thing. Like it's there's a science to it for sure.
There are some people who botch that science in a big way.
Yeah.
And I can't really begrudge someone when they're confronted with something that's really mediocre. But that's, if you're trying to get someone into comics and you hand them a comic, you're not going to hand them something mediocre.
We're not doing that.
And then they're going to look at something and they're going to say something that it's like, I don't know which way to read it in. And it's like, all right, well, throw in the towel.
Man.
But that does go to your point that those in between panels, again, to you or I, very simple, but to another person, just the fact that they could say, I don't know which direction to read in, goes to show that it is somewhat individualized.
Yeah. Yeah. Then that's another thing that I think is definitely something that comics can do that other mediums can't. Is there any anything that comes to mind for you that I think that comics kind of embody, that I think like possibly I think music maybe, like how does it contrast between that and
Well, this is going to be it's going to sound really silly, but I like that I can like listen to records and read comics.
100%.
Whereas, if you're locked into movies or, watching a YouTube video or something, it's like, yeah, you're blocked out. But I think, and even books are a little bit, you can get lost in the sauce. It can be a little distracting, but I think because comics are easier to read, then yeah, you can listen to the music. But I guess it's similar in the sense of the economy and the scale. Like you can you can make a demo and crank it out and run off 25 copies and hand it to your friends, and you can make a mini comic and Xerox it at Kinko's and hand them off to your friends, and you can start a SoundCloud and upload your shit, and you can start a Tumblr and upload your shit.
Yeah.
And like it's sort of I would well yeah, I'd say the barrier for entry is harder for music in the sense that like you have to have gear, there's that.
Right.
But it ain't like art supplies are super cheap, so maybe at some point it balances out. But either way, I think there's that happening in in comics and music, and then there's a new Adele album, and there's
Right.
a new DC movie coming out, and it's like it can be both unobtainable and impossible to reach and engage with. It can be very top down and it can be very grassroots at the same time,
Yeah.
depending on which angle you come from. And I'd say there's also like, there's a similar fandom where it's like, I love music. Music saved my life. And it's like, yeah, you went to a Taylor Swift and a 21 Pilots concert this year, and it's not like, oh, you are a poser or anything. I'm not begrudging your love of those artists, but it's like there's that person that's kind of consuming, definitely passive and like kind of taking what comes from the top down, and then there's like I'm involved in my local music scene, and
Absolutely.
like the idea of those kind of they are both music fans. They are both lovers of music, but
Yeah.
one group of people is engaging, whereas the other person is consuming. You see that in comics for sure, where there's just like, I love comics. Fucking Punisher has sucked since 2000, and I stopped reading after that. But I love comics. And it's like that guy loves comics, bro. Like
Yeah.
you can't argue with him about his love. But there's that guy, and then there's yeah, I love comics, and I will never. You could not pay me to read a superhero comic
Yeah.
if you tried. But I have an encyclopedic knowledge of every funny animal comic from the 30s.
I want to meet that guy.
And yeah, it's like that. Those are all lovers of comics. So I guess maybe the diversity of fandoms and the disparity in how you can engage in it. I think it mirrors music a lot, and probably more so than like movies and video games, which are very like dictated top down.
Mm.
I think one thing that is on my mind a lot with comics as a medium is I guess the scale of stories they tell, and and I don't know why it took till reading the new issues of Hate. I think it might be Hate like Revisited, whatever they're calling the new series.
Yeah.
Which is terrific, by the way. I'm like Hate, I was reading when it was still running in the 90s. Like that is probably more than any single comic what like pivoted me away from superheroes and sort of expanded my world of what independent comics are and all that. Like that's always going to be the one. I've reread the series countless times. I'm like very attached to those characters and Peter Bag's work in general. Like shit, we might have to Reset or one of those like
So
off the beaten path Peter Bag comics
Yes.
that don't have to do with the Bradleys, because I mean I can talk Bag all day long. He's one of my probably my single favorite comics creator, if I'm just boiling down to like personal bias and everything. That said, as invested as I am in these characters, when I read there's been like maybe a 10 plus year gap in these stories being told. And when I pick up these comics that are talking about Buddy and Lisa's kids, and their kids are grown up, like there is a strange sentimental feeling I get. Like I feel like I have watched them grow up in real time, and I'm connected to them in this way that's so much larger than like if I see a new Hellraiser movie.
Right.
I probably started watching Hellraiser movies and reading Hate comics around the same time in my life, but I could not give a single fuck about what's going on with the Cenobites right now.
Yeah. So that's a thing that happens in comics as well, is like the continuity that a and growth that can
Right.
happen in a character that's not a time skip. It's literally happening while the book is coming out, and that happens in Love and Rockets as well.
Oh,
They
of course.
did that kind of stuff, and I think like that's the difference of like an IP and a story.
Right.
This is like it's not a it is an IP and it isn't. It's a more personal story, and it's a more intimate story that we can engage in. Uh, and I mean, you brought up a good point because I hate like turning all of these characters that we love into a product.
Right.
And like I fucking love The Simpsons just as much as anybody,
Yes.
but I don't know what the fuck is happening on The
No.
Simpsons, and like, does it matter?
Yeah, and it's so. I mean, there's as long, and that's probably like as close as you'll get to like I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's like I hear about like Avatar and like certain manga that have these kind of like long or not manga, but like anime or whatever
I guess
shonens and
anime?
stuff that just go on and on and on. And I'm sure that you can have that kind of familiarity and connection with those characters in that way. I'm sure it exists and I'm sure it happens. And maybe there's like soap operas and stuff, but again, these are like kind of control. It's outside of your control. It's outside of the creator's control how you experience these characters.
Yeah.
And I think when you can have control of the quote unquote IP, and Peter Bagg can get you up to date with what's been going on with the Bradleys, he can do that. And I think like I don't know, you like home movies, that old show,
that
it's
show
like
was amazing.
it's it's again possibly my favorite TV show ever. If they did a new season and everyone was grown up, there would be such a gap. It would be so strange. You don't know who is in control of if the story gets to be told, how it gets to be told. It's not as personal. Actually, now that I think of it, the Venture Brothers do a pretty good job keeping in continuity the character's age. That's actually a good counter to it. But even then, even with that said, I think because of the work it takes for animation and how long the gaps are between seasons, with comics, there is something there. And I can't really tell you what it is exactly, but I guess maybe it speaks to that intimacy issue where you are so familiar with these characters that I don't know. I'm speaking more from an experiential side of like how I felt reading those hate comics. And to some extent, even as IP as all the superheroes are, like when I see Batman, I get excited. Like there's some part of me that will always have a little bit of joy seeing.
Maybe that's different though, because that's Batman is an idea, and it's more of like a mythos, maybe. See, fuck, man. Now I vacillate between these two things because I both love what they do with these things, like Spider-Man, and I hate what they do with Spider-Man sometimes. But to go back to that kind of thing of experiencing that intimacy with comics, I think maybe it's like the creator's soul. It has to be. It has to be like coming from, I think, like their intimate space.
Right. I mean, I don't want to get too Grant Morrison here.
Right. Like, I don't like doing that, but it feels that way.
Listen, if I didn't have the experience, I wouldn't bring it up, but there is definitely something there. I don't know what it is. It sounds very corny to say it's magic, but like it's kind of fucking magic, bro. Like the way
it feels magical.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, again, very Grant Morrison here. I do think like, hate, love, and rockets. These are personal stories being told. Whereas, like, I do think you're exactly right about the mythology. Like, there are myths being created in these superhero comics. And again, talking about the experience, like, okay, very corny. watching Thor 4, the fourth Thor movie.
Yeah.
There's like a teaser thing in the end. This is like the most like Reddit soy face shit in the world. I'm fucking being honest with you here. There's like an end credit scene and fucking Hercules shows up. And I was like, oh, like I know they want that. Like
Yeah.
I'm giving Disney what they want. I am a puppet on a string. But it's like, why am I so excited about that? Why does that enthrall me? That I'm a grown man. I know the tricks. I'm not like I don't have like, Hercules Funko Pops around.
Yeah.
I love the character. I've read enough Hercules comics to where it's exciting. It's like as dismissive, even as like, there's no product that's more of a product than those movies. But I think that magic, that myth telling is so powerful in these comics that it continues into that, which is why, the Meteor Mans and the Hancocks and the Mystery Men's, like, movies that were created as comic movies fall kind of flat. Or even, comic book movies that are based on I don't know, IP that doesn't have that mythical quality to it. I mean, even at its best, like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, let's say, which I think are generally favorable. People hold them in pretty high esteem.
They're pretty high for what they are.
There is something there in a Batman movie that isn't there in a Guardians movie. And I think we all kind of understand. None of us want to see a Guardians movie that James Gunn doesn't do. Whereas we'll see a fucking Batman or a Spider-Man from anyone.
That's
and
true.
I think when they are able to, I don't know, freak those characters in a way, maybe it's the characters that don't have the myths. That's where like the craftsmanship of the filmmaker come into play. Like Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy. Hellboy doesn't have like that mythology to it. Those are 10 out of 10 movies. Those are like God tier, but it's all Guillermo del Toro. It's his vision. And they, case in point, they tried to make one of those fucking things without him. And now you're just left with the Hellboy mythology, which just isn't there in the same way that fucking Spider-Man is.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's dead and gone.
It doesn't hit the same. And I love, dude, that those are comics I grew up with.
Yes.
Heavy. And it is sort of different. They couldn't really put what Mignola was putting down, I think, in kind of like the understated quietness that is the comic itself. Guillermo del Toro had to transform it into a fucking a film, film piece,
kind of fantasy epic,
make it
sorts.
cinematic.
Yes,
where like it's poetic on the page, like when Mignola was doing it. Man.
And I think Mignola, I mean, those comics are, talk about like intimate, like you are filling in so much of the negative space of those comics because it is so much like shadows and black and whites, and the characters are so abstract. The way he draws them Mignola, when he's like on his shit, is so fucking cool. But you are literally like completing pictures in your eyes that are masterfully left unfinished. And so like Abe the Fishman, I think that definitely looks different to everyone.
Absolutely.
And so it is a minor miracle that GDT was able to pull it off, and it's unsurprising completely that no one else could.
They made their styles together.
Yes.
It was a beautiful marriage of where I think like it transformed the Hellboy series and the Hellboy books into something that could have been a really great IP, maybe. And maybe we would be hating on it if it was too many things, or if it was but
just for 2 movies, they did a lot.
Those 2 were great, and I think that it adds. There is a comedic tone in Mignola's original stuff, but not as much as like in the movies. And I feel like it made it more fun.
Yeah,
in that way.
Again, that's just film craft or whatever.
Yeah.
But to bring all this back to
If we
recommended
may
reading.
wrangle you in.
yes, to bring it back down to earth, I would say like I was kind of excited that this is the Wild or So I Was Born to Be comic is volume 1, because it's like these characters could age, they could grow up, you could follow, and it's obviously left as a to be continued sort of story, like, and they're not really like this comic goes so slow. It's like you could kind of stretch this out for a very long time. I don't mean to say stretch out like kill time, but these are young characters. It's a new story. They could potentially grow, and that's like, I don't know, something that I feel like a lot of comics don't understand, and maybe creators are kind of leaving that power on the table. Like we were kind of talking a little bit of shit last time on like the newer Image stuff, where it's just reads like a mini series pitch for fill in the blank streaming service. And when you finish reading those comics, like when I figured, like Ed Brubaker, who I read one of his like some story he did recently, and he's I have I'm not no slight, but it's one of these like hard boiled true crime kind of things, and it's like the story ends, and it's like that's cool,
that's fine,
good story, nice, but like potentially all those characters that were involved in that story could keep on living, it could keep on going, and like I don't know, lead more interesting lives and get into more adventures and things like that. And maybe that kind of story isn't for everyone to tell. Maybe it's not appealing to someone to be like, I want to write the same character for 30, 40 years.
That'd be like episodic guys. Like maybe they think of them not as people, and more as like these are episodes in this, and this is the cast for this episode,
right?
Like, would that, because I like Ed, don't come at us, Ed, please.
No, we're celebrating. Yes,
we're
not bad comics by any means, but they are self-contained stories, for better or worse. And in a sense, I think you're maybe, and it's not he's one of the good ones, but there's a lot of people who are maybe disciples of that, who are telling these kind of short end stories that are like, but maybe like let some maybes for down the line, let these characters grow up, since you can do that in this medium. But that's just me.
I would always say if there is finality in a comic, Marvel and DC have shown us that there are loopholes.
Right.
You can always bring a character back.
Yeah.
And I think that's to their strength. I mean, I don't get the hate. I guess I do get the hate of these comics, but you got to celebrate that, man. They can fucking do anything. They can do anything, and that's, maybe it's not as cool if you do it in film, which people say is like the synthesis of all media and like the best form of media in its final form, which I think we got some arguments against that. And as much as I like movies and cinematic pieces, I enjoy comics a little more. I've read comics. There's a couple comics that I've read probably almost 100 times.
Yeah.
That they're falling fucking apart, and it's and I love it.
Right.
Whereas like a movie, there's comfort in those movies that it's not the comforting thing for me to reread these comics. It's like it fucking gets my wheels turning, gets me excited to be alive,
Yeah, it's not, I mean, I'll throw, I can always throw Star Wars on in the background of doing anything and get up in the middle of it and turn it off in the middle of it, whatever. But like, if I'm breaking out, an issue if I'm reading the Max #1, which is probably one of those weird comics for me that I've read 1,000 times as a kid, like I'm gonna pour over the art, and it's going to draw me in a way that Ghostbusters always will. I always
Yeah.
that's if that was a comic, it would be in tatters for me. Of the amount of times I've seen it. But yeah, there's definitely some when I'm going to be more engaged on my rereads than
Yeah.
I will on my rewatches for sure.
And that's probably the connection to me with music, because there's definitely tracks that I'm sure most people just put on
Yeah.
and albums and things like that. Um, and I think that's pretty wonderful, to use I guess just some fucking passive term for lack of a better word, but I think I don't know, I think we made a pretty good case of what comics can do that other mediums can't.
I'm with it. And in the spirit of continuity, we will be back.
We will rise.
With another question. These lives will develop in real time. We will be 1 week older next time we
shall.
talk to you.
We shall.
Why don't you sign off for us, Omar?
So the war on comics continues. Catch us next week. We're gonna trade comics. We don't have the question yet, so if you guys have any questions out there that we may have the honor to answer, we'll keep fighting out there for y'all.
We're in the trenches, baby.
We're in the trenches now. Dude, give us one more, please.
A chin hut!
So, bottom line, comics do things no other medium can. They mess with time, break reality, and demand a different kind of attention. That's it for War on Comics. Got a comic that blows your mind? Let us know. See you next time.